Well, hello out there, everyone. This is your man, Lionel. I am so excited to be with you today. To everyone out there in YouTube world, welcome, welcome, welcome. YouTube, those who in Twitter world, welcome. I am your man, Lionel, my Facebook family on the Facebook page. Hello, everyone out there. I pray and I hope that you are doing well. Who am I? Well, my name is Lionel Bailey. For those of you who don't know me, I am a chaplain, a pastor. I am a counselor to many and a confidant to a very, very few. I help people move through personal growth, spiritual growth, leading to social change. And I'm excited because that's what I am going to be talking about today. We're building a community. Why? Because our goal is to move people from spiritual growth to through personal growth into social change. So I am always excited about having the opportunity to do just that. How can you become a part of the community? Well, I help people through workshops, preaching, speaking, and one-on-one counseling and coaching. So I'm here to help you if this is something that you are interested in. All you have to do is leave a comment here during the live or on demand, as well as just connect with us. My information is on our YouTube page, as well as some of our other social media platforms. So yes, I am so excited that you have decided to join me. If you could do me a favor, I would appreciate it. Go ahead on and hit that subscribe button so you can be in the queue for all of our meetings as we roll out our meetings. And every Sunday around 3 o'clock is the time that we come live to you, sometimes with guests and sometimes with not. And so we're going to have a very important conversation today. We're going to talk about embracing diversity and a moral foundation. I am super excited to join. So if you want to be a part of this conversation, all you have to do is put a comment and I will see that comment and reply to it live. Okay. So go ahead on and grab your cup of coffee, grab your favorite drink, tea, whatever it may be. And we're going to come back on the other side and talk about embracing diversity, the interplay between religion and morality. Here we go. Yeah, so once again, here we go. We're going to have this conversation now. One of the important things I want to bring to mind for everyone who is listening, those who may be listening through our audio podcast, okay? There is something very important in our society that's happening. And on many occasions, I have had conversations with people one-on-one or in group settings, whether I'm listening to this online or whatever the case may be, whatever venue I find myself having these conversations, that people always say things like, America is losing its traditional values. Have you guys ever heard that before? America is losing its traditional values. You'll hear a lot of TV personalities and pundits and opinion news articles and interviews of people talking about how the preservation of America's fundamental values are being tested, and that freedom of speech and personal responsibility are on the docket to be erased because of how our world is going. I hear this conversation all the time, and I think it's problematic. I think it's problematic because I've seen people moralize or politicize Christian values. In other words, they take a principle in the scripture or principle in the Bible or principle from a religious text, and they use it to make a political point, when all the while that scriptural text or conversation may not have had anything to do with that point. Hello, Howard. How are you doing out there, man? Good to see you again. Thanks for joining in and watching. If you have a comment or want to make have a question, please feel free to comment below. I appreciate you stopping by, doing this presentation and conversation. My goal is to communicate back and forth with people as we talk about these things. Okay, so we're talking about the interplay between religion and a moral foundation. That's the conversation that we're talking about today. Religion and moral foundation. So I want to lay the groundwork by giving you a few things to think about when people start saying things like, you know, America is losing its traditional values, right? Or American is losing its fundamental values. Or the conversation of freedom of speech and personal responsibility are under attack, right? A shifting of our moral framework. Now, why is this important to you? Here's why this is important to you. Let me say this before I go forward. Here's why this is important to you. It's important to you because if you have kids who are in grade school, if you have family members that you can't get along with around a dinner table or during holiday seasons, right? If you are having issues with the way your particular county government is being run, if you are concerned about the kind of messages that are being preached in churches, mosque, or temple when you attend these places, this is the reason why this conversation is important. Now, in order for us to see it as important, is we got to understand this. Not every conversation we have is about what's in it for me necessarily, right? In other words, what dollar amount am I going to get, or how's this going to make me that's not the point here. The point here is that sometimes we need to sit back and have these conversations because they matter. These conversations matter. Okay, so let's go forward for the sake of time. Okay, number one, family, let's talk about this thing. Okay, here's what I want to present to you. Our purpose for this conversation is that we want to explore how religion influences moral foundation and how embracing diversity and open dialogue and shared values can create a more inclusive and resilient society. Would you not agree with me that our society in America is becoming less resilient? If you have been living under a rock, okay, come on. If you have been living under a rock and you haven't noticed what's been happening in the American culture, you are sadly mistaken if you don't think our understanding of morality is in how we interpret that is influencing our society. Okay. So I want to give you a few suggestions here. Okay. As we talk about this thing, right? Here's what I want to talk about. Number one, there are three ways that religion influences our moral foundation. Okay. Everybody has a different source. This is important. Everyone has a different source of moral guidance, right? People who are Islamic, people who are Christian, people who are Buddhist, people Hindu, they all have a different text that they go to that helps them understand what is morally right and wrong. Okay, that's important for us to get. Okay, many of us, we have various texts and various teachings, various leaders, various traditions, okay, that give us moral guidance. That's important for us to understand because, sometimes we may have give the impression, oh man, why did this country do this? And why does this community do this? Okay. For instance, I'm a chaplain. Most of you know that in the military. So I have a privilege of talking and working with people from different backgrounds, from different religious backgrounds. I consider that an honor because I learn a lot about their background. Okay. Why they do what they do, what are the religious texts that guide them and provide provide a perspective that I may not be akin and aware to, right? This is also, if you look at the examples of the wars the United States have fought in the last, 20 years, you'll see that as we, went over into other countries, a lot of people saying, well, are we forcing democracy on other countries? You see, that's a moral that's a moral question. The question is, does our form of government even belong there? Now, obviously, I'm not making a point here. I'm not making that point at all. What I'm simply trying to say is that everyone has a different example. For me as a Christian, the Bible, Jesus, these are foundations that guide my moral belief. Number two, religious communities are important because they help shape your perspective and provide accountability to moral character. So that's why people go to church. Think about that. The reason why you go to church, reason why I go to church is because it's not just about me. And that's one of the issues that we have in society in America today with social media platforms, is that people can say, I can get God by myself. This kind of, some people say get God, but that's just a tongue in cheek of me saying I don't need a community. Well, I think there's some part of that can be valuable, but there's a lot of value in having people around you to keep you accountable. Because how many of you know sometimes you don't want to do the things that you ought to do? Paul the apostle said, sometimes I do the things that I don't want to do. Right? Does that make sense, family? So understand that the whole goal in having a religious community is to help shape your moral values. I was having this conversation today that when God touched my heart and changed me, it was the men and the families that surrounded me that gave me the moral guidance of how I'm supposed to live my life going forward. Okay? So this is how religion influences our moral foundation. It's critically important, being a part of a community. And then two, the third one within this group is that religious teaching encourages us to do what? Religious teaching encourages more dialogue and reasoning. It causes us to reflect. Having leaders, and people around us to help define and refine our moral thought. So what? That's why you have pastors. Look, that's why you have priests. That's why you have imams. That's why you have priestess. That's why you have professionals in this area, because they provide the catalyst. They provide the reflection and feedback, maybe giving you direction about how to apply a particular scripture text, right? That you read and may not understand. What do? When you don't understand something in a religious text, you go to a counselor. You go to someone who can provide for you moral guidance. That's critically important. So again, I want you to think about this, okay? And I want you to make a comment. Again, once again, I want to encourage you to make a comment even now, or make a comment in on demand as you watch it on demand. Once again, this is your man, Lionel, coming to you live on Sunday. We're talking about a very important topic. If you have a question or comment, feel free to list it below, and I will do my best to work with you to answer that. All right. Here's the second thing. Here's why embracing diversity and fostering open dialogue is important. All right. Here's what before I go to that, here's something that we all need to understand as well. Okay. I want to say is that morality is not exclusively a Christian perspective. Justice, equality, love. This is not just an exclusive Christian perspective. There are Buddhists, Muslims, our Jewish brothers and sisters, our Buddhist brothers and sisters who have equality, justice, love as a part of their religious and moral foundation. So people can have a strong religious belief. And I'm saying this for the Christians, without believing in Christianity. And when I came to understand that, it changed my world in a lot of different ways. All right, let's go back to the point here. All right. Respect for diverse religious and moral beliefs. The value of understanding and respecting different religious and moral perspectives. Mutual respect can create a more inclusive society. So this works even in your household. You have to respect the people in your household who may believe something quite differently than you believe. Think about that. Right, family? Think about that. You may have people in your household who don't believe the same thing you do. How do you deal with them? You still have to what? Work with them. You still have to what? Provide guidance with them. You still have to live in community, communitas, we say. You still have to share with them, right? How many of you have had arguments in your family this week? How many of you have had arguments in your family? Think about that. How many of you have had disagreements with your spouse? But watch this, or your significant other. But you still have to live in community with each other, right? You still have to live in community with each other. This is vitally important. Why? Because when we understand that people of different faith groups or people who have a different political persuasion, they still have a moral compass that they consider vitally important to their lifestyle. So the value of understanding and respecting people is a mutual respect can create more inclusive society. So instead of us running away saying, you know what, our American society has fallen, our traditional foundations, our values, freedom of speech. And wait a minute. Here's what's happening. It is not that we are losing those foundations. Is that now we are reevaluating moral perspectives from a pluralistic society. What does that mean? That means that our definition of morality now is being weighed in on people who have a different moral presuppositions or may come from a different country or a different community. And so how you define morality, instead of saying, you know, this is the way we define it in American culture. Now we're having other cultures weigh in on that, right? Because everybody can say, you know, democracy is the way. Well, what about for communities that existed for thousands of years that didn't practice democracy, but still were able to live in harmony? Does that make sense? Okay. Having open dialogue and the role of open dialogue in moral growth, the benefit of engaging in open and honest dialogue conversations about morality. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying that when we have other moral perspectives come into the conversation, we're now having open and honest dialogue about what morality really is and what does it really look like, right? Man, so many different things come to my mind, right? Having conversations with people who are different from you. I grew up in a small southern town that was segregated. Yes. Shout out to those towns. I'm not going to say names because I ain't putting nobody on blast. But my town that I grew up in as a kid was segregated. White people were on this side. Black folk were on the other side. Right? I experienced the Ku Klux Klan as a kid. I remember it vividly like it was yesterday. Right? Why would people respond that way? I would say, although I obviously don't agree with their moral belief system, that what they were doing was right. Oh man, I'm gonna get in trouble with that one. What they were doing was right. And how do you say that the way you get rid of that is through violence? No, I don't think that's the way. I think you have to have dialogue. And I think our country is made better because we have dialogue with people who have a different perspective than we. So interfaith dialogue, secular dialogue. What's secular dialogue? Talking with people who are not in the church. Do you know that there are people in the who are not in churches or mosque or temple who have a deeper and more rich understanding of morality and right and wrong than people who go to religious services? Did you guys know that? It's very, very true, right? It's very, very true. Why? Dr. King said this, that love, justice, and equality are embraced by individuals regardless of their religious affiliation. In other words, this is where we find common ground. Can we agree that justice is good? Can we agree that equality is a good thing? There are people that can hold these viewpoints without having any connection with religion or religious communities at all. That's important for us to understand. So now we're not talking about faith, a sacred versus secular, or the church versus the world. Listen, those days are played. It's not church versus the world. Jesus said in the text, I came, right, to seek and save those who are lost. Right? Scripture, think about it this way. When Jesus performed his ministries as recorded in the New Testament, he was all about human relationships and systematic relationships functioning for the betterment of everyone in that community. You understand? Right? And so Jesus wasn't just about providing these resources and moral teaching for perhaps Hebraic communities. But Jesus was also about helping and including those who were considered Gentiles according to the New Testament into this conversation as well. When you look at this is important, because when you and I look at the New Testament, what we're looking at is a God who is fighting across secular and sacred lines, across the church and the world, across the temple and those who didn't go to temple, in order to expose God's righteousness to everyone. Right? And that's what Paul the Apostle, taking a lead from Christ and those who were his disciples, with his missionary work he did all throughout Asia Minor, all throughout Greece and Rome, right? From Jerusalem first to the whole world. So that's something for us to think about. This is why it's important for churches to have, let me just say this while I look you in the face. This is why it's important for churches to have services and programs that reach out of the community, that do things out in the community for the betterment of everyone, those who are sacred and those who are secular. Once again, this is your man, Chaps, coming to you live. Hope you guys are here. Thanks for staying and locking in with me. Please feel free to make a comment either live or on demand, and I will make sure that I answer that and be there for you. All right. So let's continue the conversation as we begin to wrap up now. All right. So we now let's talk about the power of shared values, right? Focusing on shared values bridges divides between different religions and moral perspectives. Shared values across religion and moral perspectives, such as compassion, justice, and equality, right? Steve Jobs says, establish norms, embracing diverse perspectives. Society must include the ability to explore beliefs and values that have been constrained by religious dogma. In other words, in order for us to create a more just society, we must include people into the conversation who don't believe the way we believe, who see the world as different. Hear me, y'all? We have to include people in the conversation who see the world differently. That's what Steve Jobs says. Without, watch this, religious constraint. Now, I'd be the first person to tell you, as a chaplain, as a minister of the gospel of Jesus in particular, I'm talking about me, I will be the first person to tell you that there is a lot of good that comes from religious communities. But I will also be just and tell you there's a lot of bad that comes from religious communities. And sometimes religion and churches and temples and mosques have been used to constrain people from finding truth, for exploring truth, exploring what they believe and why they believe what they believe. Are you understanding what I'm saying? I got to clap. I'm not clapping for myself. I'm just saying this is important because these are the things that happen, right? That the church has been on the end of constraining people. Right? So all I'm saying is now, in order for us to move forward, we have to go outside of the norm, and as James Cone once called, the risk of faith. I love that phrase. The risk of faith, being able to go outside of the norm of religious constraints in order to find Christ. And let me say this. This is when I begin to get excited. This is when I begin to talk too much, and I may get myself in trouble. But I'm going to say it because I believe it down to my nitty gritty bones. That sometimes Jesus is found outside the church. Right? Oh man, I know I'm going to get in trouble with that. Okay? Sometimes Jesus is found outside of the church. What? Okay. Now, I'm not saying that's a good thing, but I'm saying you got to remember when you look at the New Testament, Jesus was crucified by the Romans, according to scripture, with the backing of religious people. But it was the non-religious people who loved him. All right. So we have to then focus on shared values, that they're shared. What are our shared values? Compassion, justice, equality. This is important. Okay. Let's move forward as we begin to close up. I got just a few more minutes to finish out here and I'm done. I've already hit my time marker. So thank you guys for being patient with me. Thank you so much for hanging in there with me. Building a resilient society through shared values. How? Well, number one, you got to overcome polarization. The danger of polarization and division that's supposed to say society. I apologize. Focuses on shared values and open dialogue can reduce polarization and foster unity. Dialogue, Steve Jobs says, makes us more able to for forward thinking. When we open to dialogue, we move closer to forward thinking. All right. The role of diverse, so encouraging, overcoming polarization. Okay. Second thing here is encourage moral innovation and progress. The role of diverse perspectives in driving more innovation and progress. Examples of moral progress and achievement through the interaction of different religious and secular viewpoints. You look at the civil rights movement. The civil rights movement was a phenomenal, right? And there are other movements, some current as well, that have been a phenomenal display of what happens when you bring other people to interact from different perspectives, right? To move forward, to have forward moral progress, interfaith dialogue communities, ecumenical societies, right? These things make the world a better place. Becoming a part of them, participating in them, will help encourage moral innovation and progress. What are you saying? This is on a large scale. More innovation and a progress means that you are pushing everybody forward to creating a better world And then building a resilient, more society, the importance of embracing diversity, fostering openness dialogue, focus on shared values. These factors can contribute to a more inclusive and resilient society. One person said, adapt to change. I like this. Adapt to change and embrace of diversity. Increase of adapting to change will help make us a more inclusive and diverse society, right? Having shared values, reevaluating our moral perspective is an opportunity for us to become a more pluralistic society, right? This is important as well. Boy, I can get down into the weeds with that one, but I want you to really understand what we're doing here. Okay. Again, so just to recap, I'm gonna see if I can recap here. Number one, we got to understand that people have different perspectives. Number two, religious communities are important in helping us. Number three, leaders and people who are philosophers, if you will, if you can stomach that, are important for us in developing a moral foundation that is open to diversity. Respect difference in moral religious beliefs. The role of open dialogue. How do you do that? You got to talk to people, right? You got to talk to people. The power of shared values is vitally important. Now, overcoming polarization, encouraging more innovation, building a resilient society. How do you do that? Is that you embrace diversity, foster open dialogue, and focus on shared values. Engage in open dialogue, embrace diversity, focus on shared values. That's how you do that, y'all. That's how you do that. So if you're one of those individuals and you are caught, you think that the world is falling apart, that the world is going to be over with, right? Listen, family, it's time for us to understand that the world is changing, that things are not going to be the way they've always been, that our job is not to keep kicking against the goads, but to get along with the process. So I want to just leave you with this, and as I conclude here, I want to give you some my perspective of why this is important and how it influences us. Just a second. In Acts chapter 2, on the day of Pentecost, it says there were Jews living in Jerusalem, devout men and women from every nation under the heaven. This is Acts chapter 2. And now there, in verse 6, and then their sound occurred, and the multitude became bewildered because they were each hearing one speaking their own language. Verse 7, and they were amazed and marveled, saying, are these not Galileans? Verse 8, and how is it that each one hears others talking in another language in which they were born? They're Medes, they're Elamites, Mesopotamia, Judean, Cappadocia, Pontus, Asia, Pergama, Pamphylia, Egypt, Cretans, Romans, Jews, proselytes, Arabs. This was a movement of the Spirit. This was a movement of the Spirit. And so when you hear people saying, particularly church people or religious people saying, we're losing America, we're losing our traditional values, we are losing our American foundation, freedom of speech. Here is what's happening: that you have other people now who you may have dominated politically and socially and isolated because of social media and because of main media platforms. And you were not able to hear different voices. This is true. Now you have those people and you're able to see with your own eyes through this thing. You're able to see and feel and hear yourself without that stuff being filtered by major media outlets. You're able to see it with yourself. Now you have these people weighing in and saying, well, maybe what I believe is not totally wrong, but there's another perspective. How does this work in your life? You have people in your life, you're trying to get people in your circle, in your relationship, and they believe different. Maybe you were confused and thought that you were the only person who was right until you sat down with the counselor and the counselor said, no, that's not right. Or you and your spouse sat down with the counselor and you listened for a change to what that counselor had to say to give you another perspective. Maybe you lived in a bubble, or maybe you're about to make a career transition and you're having to make that career transition. You're finding yourself having to change your perspective about things that maybe you were not open to before. Or maybe your child has walked into your house and said something to you that's shaking the very foundation of your belief system, and you don't know how to respond to it. How? Open dialogue. Sit down. Listen to what they have to say. You may not agree, and you may not totally understand, but you're open to the dialogue that maybe there's a new way of learning. This has been the case for communities throughout the world, even in the New Testament text that I've read to you a moment ago. And this will be the catalyst. This is where we are in America. This is where you are in your individual life. Les Brown, the great motivational speaker, said the hardest thing he had ever done is to become the person that he is now, that he did not know what he did not know. But when he was introduced to a different way of living and a different way of being, it changed his life. So family, I have gone way over my time. I want to thank you guys for listening either live or on demand. For those of you who are on just listening, thank you so much for continually supporting the podcast, supporting what we're doing. And I want you to be here with us. And as we grow spiritually, leading to social progress, that's the goal. The goal is not to just focus on ourselves. We want to get better so that we can make the world a better place. And I want you to join. So I'll see you next Sunday right here with a guest, or maybe just me. If you have a comment, please make a comment in below on demand, or as you are watching it live. You can leave a comment and send me an email. All of my information is included. If you have questions, I love to dialogue with you. Go ahead on and hit that subscribe button. And if you have any other ideas or questions that you can use to contribute to this conversation, please make a comment, share, like, say, hey, man, I heard this conversation. I think you may like it. Share it with them. And let's have that dialogue, okay? Thank you so much for listening, y'all. Peace. Enjoy your Sunday.